7. Thank you all for coming. We've got a better turnout than we usually enjoy, so that's good. Thank you for coming, everybody. Apologies and reasons for absence. None. Good. Declaration by members of any interests?
None.
None. No need to consider applications for dispensations. A reminder to everyone that the meeting's being recorded, and assuming it works, which it usually does now, it'll go on the internet on YouTube. So please say what you don't mind going on the internet. Now at this point we adjourn the meeting for a public session. That's for the public to express a view or ask a question on relevant matters on the agenda. Once the public session finishes, I'll call it to a close. Then you can still stay and listen, but you can't take part in the rest of the meeting. Also, perhaps because we've got a lot of people here who are not normally here, worth saying that we have instituted a new system a couple of months ago, where I'd like to know in advance, so I can organise it better, who, if anyone, wants to speak and on what, so that we know, how to take it, and that contributions are limited to 3 minutes, unless councillors want to ask questions or something like that, and it extends it. So it'll be 3 minutes. I've got a clock. So who would like to speak and on what? And the clerk here, Yvonne, will make a note so she can keep me in order. Who's going to want to speak about items on the agenda?
Yeah, I want to speak
yes?
about planning on in 16 Lloyd's Green.
Oh, okay, the Lloyd's Green one. And your name is?
Gary.
Gary.
Yeah.
Gary on Lloyd's Green. Okay.
David Allen Butler on Oxney Old Barn Development.
And what was your name, sorry?
David Allen Butler on Oxney
David
Old
Allen
Barn.
Butler on the okay, I remember.
Carl Augustin here for Anchor Barn.
Carl on Anchor Barn.
Anchor.
Right.
Yeah.
Any more takers? I think that means we've got all the 3 planning applications with someone wanting to speak. Nobody else though?
Well, what about an item which is not on here? One we had previously. I'm talking about the removal of the conditions.
Okay, I understand. It's not on the agenda tonight.
No, but I've got a query. If you can't take it, fine. Otherwise, I've got a query.
Okay, let's go through the others and then see what the query is and whether we'll take it.
Sure.
Right. So. In that case, what we'll do is we'll do it in the order here. So, who wanted to talk about Anchor Barn?
Me.
You. Okay. Please start while I pass with the machinery. Off you go.
I'm really here to answer any questions. I think we're doing minor changes to a building that was built in 2008 as a garage and landing quarters. We're adding solar panels and making the upstairs a living quarters, granny annex. We're not changing anything structural. We're making it a sustainable building, and that's about it really. I think it's mine. We made sure with the pump house architects that we did nothing structural. We're not changing any foundations or any roofing or anything. So that was key to keep it nice and simple.
You're putting the terrace on, the stairs are
And out in the
outside
back.
and the terrace. Yeah.
So we have an outdoor access
Okay. And you're putting solar panels on the roof.
on the roof. Yeah.
And there's the added complication that you've declared in the application that you're falling within the old curtilage of the Grade 2 Lordings.
Yes, that's right.
But that's for, I mean, councils will have their views, but I think that's probably for the specialists at Ashford to worry about.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to ask any questions of the applicant? You're actually the applicant there.
Yeah.
Anyone want to ask any questions of the applicant?
No.
No? So I think that's probably, we've read it and you've given us the opportunity to ask questions. You've told us the broad picture. Okay. The next one then is land adjacent to 16 Lloyd's Green, the land at the back. That's yourselves.
Yeah. I'm not really speaking of Yeah, basically it's proposed the 2 houses and 2 lots of garages on there, which I feel is absolutely ridiculous for the amount of land that's there. Obviously we're in 17, so we're in 17, which is now going to have 8 windows overlooking our garden. Also, the track that they're proposing to use as access is also completely ridiculous, to try and get 2 cars down there or a car and a pedestrian down there at the same time, because it's supposed to be a footpath. I did have some other bits also on there, which is obviously the pumping station. It doesn't say what's going to happen to that. But basically, really, the whole idea just seemed absolutely ridiculous down there. And obviously, we wasn't even aware that the land was for sale. There was no notice of it. Going for sale, so we're a bit disappointed with that, really.
And number 17 will be, if you go up the house, it's the first one
Yeah.
round the right angle, coming up the left-hand side, I guess, and then round the end.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's your back looks out on that land.
Yeah, everything about it is on my back.
Yeah,
pretty much.
okay.
Yeah. I did a letter here which I put online. I can share that with you.
Please do.
I've got a copy of this.
It's on the board.
Yeah, okay.
That's
the one-
I'll
that's
post
the
that
one
up
that's
so you
already
can
done.
keep a copy of that so that you
Yes.
can see the stuff that I've written on about that I was not happy about.
Okay.
To read at some point.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone want to ask any questions? Oh, yes. Alan?
Thank you, Jeremy. Do you feel you're speaking on behalf of yourself and your own household, or do you feel you're speaking on behalf of a number of households in Lloyd's
Yeah,
Green?
I'm speaking for my household and other households, because obviously like a lot of public use that access to go and down the woods for the dogs and stuff, and the kids go down the woods, which now means they've got to come out onto the road, and then they've got to go down a footpath, which they could be potentially going down that path, the car comes and there's not enough space there for the cars and a pedestrian, especially kids.
I don't want to know details, but do you know of any households that you think might be in favour of the project? In Lloyd's Green? I don't want to know the details, I don't know.
I wouldn't have thought so, because obviously
You
as
do.
well, there's the parking issue that's also on Lloyd's Green, which although they're going to build garages, it's still going to need visitors' car parking, which would also be a problem in the future.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I think people would be against it, other people, but
Okay. Jill, do you want to
Sorry,
comment
yeah,
on
I'm
that
in
as
Lloyd's
well?
Green, so no, I'm against it, 27. I think it's a dangerous precedent to set this because the track has already been implicated in an application already gone forward by Mr Carpenter for one house at the bottom, this is an access which is used as a field access, so it has the occasional quad bike going up it, and perhaps an agricultural vehicle or some sort. If you start having one house, that's going to vastly change for service vehicles, delivery vehicles and things like that. To add 3 houses will change that completely from being a rural pathway for a footpath down to an ancient woodland walk. You can't sort of say, oh, we want to modernise it and make it all good for wheelchair users, and because it's not the sort of destination that a person with poor mobility or something would be able to go to anyway. So it wouldn't be something you could say, oh, we'll make this a really nice surface so that people can access. It's the sort of rural situation where you can't really do that. It's not for that sort of situation. So I do feel this is a bit of a dangerous precedent to set. That track is not wide enough for vehicles. If you're at the bottom and someone comes in at the top, you don't know, you can't see it at all. So what you're going to do, who's going to be reversing up and down? Instead of having the one application from Mr Carpenter saying you've now got 3, what are they going to do? How are you going to have people reversing? I can see damage to people's boundaries. I'm quite surprised that the people along the track haven't been consulted, because it will vastly change the aspect of the back of their garden where they sit, obviously, which is immediately on that boundary of that track. And I can see fences being damaged because there are places where vehicles will not make it round. If you've got big lorries or anything like that going down there, they're just not going to make it. So, yeah, I can say I'm against it, and I do know of other residents. Obviously, it would help the parish council for someone to go around and get a general opinion. I'm quite happy to do that.
Thank you. Anyone want to talk to Jill? Yeah. Paul.
Oh, well, I just had a question for Gary. I suspect I know the answer, but just purely out of information. The new purchasers of that plot of land, have they made any contact with you as the next door neighbour?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
No.
that's fine.
It's like,
Yeah.
we didn't even know the land was for sale,
Yeah.
to be quite honest with you, and it just...
But
We
there's
didn't-
been no contact from the
No, we didn't
from
know
the people that
until-
put in the application.
Yeah, we
to
didn't
you
know
as a
until
neighbour.
then, really, and then it's just like a surprise, and then it's there, and feel like we don't have a choice in the matter. It's just like,
That's great, thank you.
Right.
Gus, Jill, has anybody in Lloyd's Green had any communication with the applicant?
They've sent, I think, some letters to. Did you get a letter from the council? I think at number 17. From the council to notify you?
No, I asked it's been
Yeah.
sold and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
applying for planning.
Yeah, I think
14, 15 and
Yeah, it's
16
just the
on
ones
that
in that
side
corner
and
that's
all
all
the way
right,
along
yeah.
the bottom.
Yeah,
where
but
it
not
falls.
running the whole length of the track.
No.
No, everyone with a garden that backs out hasn't got notification, or so there may be people along there who don't even realise what's going on. Because, like I say, there were no signs up or anything anywhere for it to be
Yeah.
sort of visually obvious that it was going to be sold. So.
Well, of course, there's no need to be. It's not good, but there's no need for them to advertise a sale in the way that there
No,
is a
but I
need
say
for them to
people won't
advertise
be
a
aware
plan.
probably
Yeah.
because there's nothing visual there to sort
Sure.
of, unless you would sort of came across something.
I mean, it was supposed to be old
Gentlemen, who was the previous owner? Who was the previous owner?
Ashford.
council?
The council. Yeah.
Perhaps a time for you to read out your statement.
Well, I obviously made some inquiries about it. I wasn't over enamoured with the application. I thought it was a bit crude actually. But I know we're recording this, but it's a fact. And I made some inquiries as to what had actually happened, not with the planning department on my land, but with the housing department, because that's who owned the land. And I got an answer. This small surplus piece of land was recently sold at auction on behalf of housing, with the benefit of and subject to all rights enjoyed by Southern Water Pumping Station situated in the middle of it. So all the rights that Southern Water have got there, they've retained. How the hell they're going to build those two houses there, I don't know. And it raised about 4.5k, like, 43k, which is really beside the point. I mean, someone spent that money, they're going to want to do something with it, not turn it into allotments, I don't think, which would have been a good idea. But there you are. So it's not a housing problem now. It's a problem for the owner of it. And I think trying to get that application through may be a bit of a struggle.
Can I just ask, was it sold as horticultural ground?
I've no idea, no, I shouldn't have thought so. I don't know, that's a good point, I don't know. I wasn't involved in the sale or anything.
Yeah.
I got this information from an officer of the housing department. Yeah.
I presume that since it was housing and they traditionally, although they've sold some of the houses off, owned Lloyd's Green and all the land in the middle, it's just housing land.
I would say that would be a safe bet, but I mean...
It's just frustrating, like I say, because it could have been like, say, for neighbours, could have bought it and wrote stuff on there and left access to the other people with the village.
Sam?
Just quick, there wasn't any on the portal, there wasn't any correspondence from Southern Water, was there?
No, I informed Southern Water and it's now gone to their planning department and they're dealing with
They've
it.
got all the rights and stuff.
Yes,
Sure.
yeah, exactly. They didn't know anything about it when I told them.
Good point there, Sam. Colin, did you
No,
want to raise,
nothing else, not at this stage.
does anyone else want to raise things on that? Okay, just while we're in the public session, before we get on to consider our view of the application, I think it's worth just like...
Oxney.
No, I know, I'm not getting there, I'm still on the screen.
Okay.
The path that goes through from the middle of Lloyd's Green, between the two houses on the corner, yours and your neighbour's, to the piece of land at the back. Yeah?
Yeah.
Which is the way, if you lived in Lloyd's Green, you would walk through to the woods, as I think Jill said earlier. I'm not clear whether that has been sold as well. I mean, there's a plan here that suggests a little bit of it has, or maybe hasn't. I mean, we've never seen the red line of what was sold. But I gather that there are a number of people who lived in Lloyd's Green for many decades who can say, hand on heart, that they have walked that in the past, and therefore there is an opportunity, if people in Lloyd's Green get themselves together, to make sure now that you get signed statements, sworn statements, and you make the effort to put in an application to Kent County Council to reserve that path as a public right-of-way on the grounds that it's been used as of right by residents for more than 20 years. But you've got to provide evidence, you've got to make a file up properly, there are rules. That goes into Kent County Council, they will then spend years considering it, but at least you've got it in.
Yeah.
But if you don't put it in, the risk is that you could lose it.
I've heard the biggest one so far is 60 years, so...
Yeah, that's right. But you need a bunch. You know, if you can get 20 people saying it, better than 2.
Yeah.
But you only need, I think you only need 20 years, so
Yeah.
don't get too carried away with it. 60 is great, but 25 is good as well.
Cool.
And someone in Lloyd's Green really wants to get on top of that, I would suggest. I'll just leave it with you. The other thing is that all of you who are concerned ought to be putting this on the portal to planning on their website, like you have, I hope.
Yeah, that's
everyone should. Yeah, you said that. Yeah. If you can get 20 on there, better than 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, as you're saying about the portal. Is there a deadline? Because on the old system, you could see what the deadline was for the comments.
I
I
can't
can't
see it.
see one.
I would say it would be the 11th, because that's when it gets decided, so I guess you'd have to do
Yeah,
it.
they get moved.
On my letter it says
So that's what they've got it officially as, the 11th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right then. Yeah, I did wonder because of the new portal, leaves a lot to be
It doesn't
desired.
put the indeed. Yeah, okay. So that's Lloyd's Green, we've finished with that. Yeah, okay. And then the next one is the Oxney Isle Barn? Yes, Oxney Isle Barn. You wanted to talk about that?
Yes, I
You're
do.
the applicant, aren't you?
I was just going to say that. Both Janesta and I are applicants for this particular planning development. I'm not going to spend any time at all on the design and the structure and whatever. You've got 36 documents and 400 pages of that, and I will be very surprised if there's anything missing, but you may not agree with it, but it's there. What I'd like to do is just spend a few moments giving you some understanding of the work that we've gone through to get to where we are today. And I think the first thing was that when we moved here in 2004, we bought a derelict barn, which some of you may have seen when it was derelict, and we spent quite a lot of money converting it because it was going to be our home for life. That was our intention, and we spent more money on it than we really intended. Less than 2 years later, I had major surgery on my back. I now have plates in my back. I'm partially paralysed in the legs, but I do Pilates twice a week, I'm very proud of. It looks as if there may be a need for me to have single-storey accommodation in the not-too-distant future. So back in 2015, we started looking for single-storey accommodation in the area. We don't want to move from the area, we love the area, we want to stay here. I hate to get morbid and say we'd like to die here. I would like not to die here, I'd like to live here. And we're actually at a point now where from 2015 onwards, we really couldn't find anywhere. In 2019, I had the opportunity to speak briefly with Jeremy about what there were opportunities in the area, and he offered one particular house in the street that might be coming up for sale, a bungalow, and it wasn't appropriate for us at that time. And he also very kindly suggested I contact Mick Burgess. And it's at this point that I just need to say, we've done planning before in other places. It's always been quite arduous and quite difficult and almost confrontational. And the thing that we found differently at the beginning of this, knowing that we might have a difficulty in developing something, is that we've had support and direction whenever possible, and that's been very, very helpful to us. Mick suggested that because we had a piece of land, we might wish to consider Para 79 development. We already had, and we discounted it because the people that we asked for advice on actually said that it would not be possible. We then contacted an architect, a landscape architect, a conservationist and an ecologist to see what could be done to comply with the Para 79. And in your documents it'll be seen as Para 80, it's changed its number. And essentially the paragraph 80 talks about an individual property of both architectural and technical merit. And we started the journey of that. After the very first early design, we presented it to Ashford Council for a pre-app, and it was very clear that we were way off the mark, and they suggested that we actually contacted the design panel, which is a group of architects, specialist architects, who have experience of this type of development. And to cut a long story short, we visited the design panel 3 times over 2.5 years. We had a report each time, we actioned a report each time, and earlier this year we received a final report which essentially said that we had complied with the requirements of Para 80, and we then submitted the application to the county. What we would just like to say is we're members of the Countryside charity, and we are very aware of the needs to actually look after our area. Our field is no longer used. 3 farmers have turned down the opportunity to use the field. 2 of them have used it previously and don't want it. Our near neighbour 2 years ago didn't want to continue to graze sheep on it. This year he didn't want to crop it, and we ended up paying to have a farmer crop the field, and we donated the grass to the horse sanctuary around the corner. But essentially the field is not wanted in the locality, and for that reason 2.5 years ago we moved on to this design. People have had 2.5 years to think about it. We consulted locally with 2 or 3 neighbours 2.5 years ago, including one of the farmers. Nobody objected at all to what we were doing. Nobody. We are now at a stage where we have a design which is technically at the very forefront of buildings. It's also at the forefront of ecology. We're one of the first designs to use the DEFRA assessment of biodiversity net gain. I have trouble saying that. From next year, new developments will need to have 10% additional diversity net gain from that which they started with. So if they cause any damage, they have to reproduce that, get it right moment, rectify that damage and also add to it. So 10% is the target. Ours is currently running at 27%. We are way over. And the reason for that is we're passionate about the area. We want to do something about it. We've ordered quite a few hundred trees to go in, subject to planning permission. We're not going to buy them if we don't get planning permission. And we believe that we are going to look after with care the area and hopefully live here through the rest of our retirement.
Okay, thank you. I let you go on a bit there because you were giving us a lot of useful information, so thank you for that. Does anyone want to ask questions about
Can
that?
I speak, please?
And then I was going to also say, did anyone want to come from the other side? Should we just ask questions of that bit and then come to you, Mrs. Metcalfe, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes, we come to you in a moment. So, questions of the applicant? No? So, Mrs. Metcalfe.
I have 1 or 2 points. First is, I live in the barn at Blackbrook Farm. My son Harry farms at Blackbrook. A couple of years ago, we had serious flooding from water pouring down the track that leads down to the farm. And this is actually an annual occurrence, is fighting off the flood. Now we're really worried that this new development will discharge grey water, as it's called, into the ditches, and it will add to the flow of water coming down to the farm. I had the studio completely flooded 2 years ago, and it took 6 months to dry out. Everything had to go into store while that was going on. It was extremely difficult. The flooding is a serious problem at the bottom of the hill. The second thing is that the field 2 years ago was grazed for just 6 weeks, but it wasn't found to be good for grazing. It's a hay field, and it has always been used as a hay field, which is a wonderful shelter for ecology of all sorts. The trees that are already planted, little apple trees along the bank there, it will damage their roots seriously to do this work when the house is built. The house itself is huge, and it has a number of roof slopes on it, all of which discharge water, which must go somewhere. And I know that part of the design has a stream with little ponds leading down to a bigger pond. And this is all part of this plan for, meant to be for ecology and saving everything. Now, my son Harry, who farms at Blackbrook Farm, couldn't be more aware and take more care than he does of all the local flora and fauna that's in the area. And in fact, it's an area of outstanding beauty, and we have some rare plants and some rare birds on the site. And the disturbance that will cause these creatures, I mean, the badgers have a passageway down there. There's endless raptors comb the hayfield frequently, and we would lose those while all this construction work was going on for probably 2 or 3 years before it was fully completed. We've seen another big house in the area going up, and it's still happening 3 years later. Big lorries are coming up and down a long track to get to it, and the disruption has been enormous to those neighbours.
Okay.
That's all I have to say for the moment.
Okay,
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Let me just, we'll just ask Mrs Metcalfe questions, and then we'll see where we go from there. You mentioned grey water, and just to be quite specific, what did you mean by grey
I
water?
believe
Water
it's-
off the roofs?
I think it's partly roof discharge, and it's also the washing up water and that sort of thing that goes into drainage systems, but doesn't always cope with it.
I don't
And it's
think-
going to be added.
That's what I wanted to
we
try and
get
get to. Okay.
washing machines and
Yeah,
things like that.
In my understanding, and I'm not an expert, but in my understanding, they definitely should not go into what you call grey water. Grey water is off of roofs. It's surface water by any other name. Washing machines and dishwashers and that are all part of the foul water, should go through the treatment plant,
Yes, they should.
in my
They
understanding.
should, but don't.
Well, I certainly hope they do. I mean, there are building regs people to sort that out if it's a new building. I agree with you that there are people who've done post-fits here and there in towns particularly that don't follow the rules. This is going to be built new, but I hear what you say. But as far as grey water is concerned, that should be off the roofs. And of course, all you've got off the roof is what would have previously landed on the land. You have taken out, it's true, a piece of land that it won't soak into because you've got a concrete floor over it. But apart from that, it's the same water you've got anyway from the land.
Where will the roof water go? Because there are a number of roofs in the plan, because the various buildings,
Well,
there are
there'll be
several
gutters around
buildings.
the outside.
It's
and they'll
not
be
just
running- down.
single bungalow. It's
No,
got
I understand.
visitor wings, it's got extra bits added onto it.
They'll be
And there are a
going
lot
down drain
of
pipes.
slopes of roofs.
Yeah, down drain pipes into whatever's being dealt with for the surface water.
We
And you
haven't got
mentioned
main
streams.
drainage, have we?
No, it's surface water, and it'll go into whatever arrangements they make. As you mentioned, there are streams and what have you. I haven't studied that in detail, I'm afraid. Just by way of example, take my own place, which is 20 years old, in a close of 9 houses, and the surface water goes off to a stream about 600 yards away via an attenuation pond. That was all approved by the Environment Agency when it was built.
Jeremy, as I've got the detail, would it be useful if I shared it?
Please do,
Okay.
just briefly.
The water management system is a complete system. Rainwater and runoff water goes into a grey water, as we've described. That is actually clean enough to use for watering the plants and things like that. Any other water goes through a clargester or treatment system which produces, in theory, and I say in theory, I will never want to try it out, drinkable water afterwards. And I don't want to do that, but that will then go into the grey water tank as well. The grey water tank will be 10,000 litres, and it's designed to last through the lifetime of the summer for watering plants throughout the summer, so we don't need to take mains water for anything but the basic services in the house. There were 2 or 3 other things that we... roof levels, interestingly, we went through 3 different roof level designs, and the design panel insisted upon a multi-level roof system to replicate the type of environment that a small farmstead would actually have. And it was decided by them that that would be the most settled design that would fit within the landscape. The ponds, I've already talked to Harry last night about the ponds. We can actually change the design of the ponds, but I would like to say that the volume of water that's going to go down through the field is virtually no different from any other. The single difference would be Genesta's and my personal water use. That's the difference. And the water management system, which includes taking grey water for flushing toilets and things like that, saves over 100 litres a day per person. So there's quite a lot of savings there. Over the first 20 years of the build, we will save 70,000 tonnes of CO2. Don't ask me where the number came from. I think that's the right figure, but if it isn't, have a look in the document because it's in there.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, I'm grateful for the explanation or the clarifications which I was trying to suggest about the grey water. And I'm also glad that you're actually using it for flushing, which of course is usually the first use in commercial premises of grey water, is to take rainwater off the roof and use it to flush the toilets.
And it won't go down the ditch and it won't go down the lane into
Once it's been into the toilet, it goes down the...
I tried to give Harry that assurance, but we still have to have another discussion.
Take your point. Okay. Does anyone else want to raise questions then with Mrs. Metcalfe or the applicant? Alan?
Doubtless I could have found this if I looked. How big is the plot?
The plot is just over 1/4 acre
Okay.
in a 3.5 acre field.
Okay. And would the 3.5 acre field remain as part of the property, or
It will not remain part of the barn property. The barn will go with a 1/2 acre, which is already in. In fact, we would be prepared to give a small amount of extra land to whoever buys the barn for a garden and so. But we will retain the 3.5 acres under our control.
and if you were living in this new build, you'd be selling your existing property?
We will be. In fact, it's on the market, and we already have a potential buyer.
Yeah.
And that potential buyer has already accepted the design as being acceptable.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Anyone else? Apple?
First of all, having read through your documents, and they are extensive. I realised that fairly quickly I got out of my depth in terms of the technical aspects, but that's as may be. Also, I would just say I commend the people that made the comments, because even they might be disagreeing with it, I think they're very well reasoned, well laid out, and I felt I had a good understanding of it all. To my mind, I had only. Thank you for explaining about the rainwater and so on. As the owner of a property with a Clargester, I completely understand that we're not on main drainage. I just have one question. When the emptying comes, if I've got that right, a vehicle will have to come into empty.
Yes.
Okay. Has that driveway still to be built?
The driveway's already there because it's a current access to the field. It's 5 metres wide,
yeah.
but it's only got hardcore in it at the moment. Before we even start the building, we're going to have to put a proper concrete drive in there to take the weight of vehicles and so on.
Right. Because that's a major concern that I seem to pick up from, I think it must have been Harry who wrote it, or maybe the other gentleman who wrote, that the banking is quite fragile. It's fine if you're taking a Land Rover over or what have you, but if you're going to take over one of the big construction vehicles or one of the big sewage emptying vehicles.
Well, it takes a hay cart with about 15 rolls of hay on, so it's quite a few tons. But,
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And the thing that we've already signed up to, and if you look in it somewhere, to answer your earlier question about routes, we've actually got a route protection system that we have to sign up to, and that will be done.
Thank you very much indeed. I picked up also on the detailed work on the biodiversity piece, which I applaud you for, and in my view you're considerably ahead of the game on that. I just wanted to make those couple of points, but I thought it was well thought out on both sides.
Well, thank you.
Very helpful.
Can I just add one more point?
Please do.
That the building itself, being placed where it is proposed, sets a precedent for future buildings to spring up all around. It won't happen, obviously, in the immediate future, but it could. It could happen. Because one is built there, other people will be encouraged to do the same sort of thing. That's it.
An interesting dilemma, because Harry owns most of that land.
Well,
So if it's built on, he would have to give
yes,
it
but he's not going to last forever, is he?
No, I agree with that, and that's a different issue.
Okay, all right.
Sorry,
Yes, sorry.
Just intrigued. What's the rough timeline, sort of start to finish? I don't know. It may have been in the paperwork. I didn't quite read it.
I'm an eternal optimist. We've already got a managing contractor lined up. We haven't signed a contract. We are close to finishing the engineering design in detail, but that's quite a chunk of money, £12,000. I don't want to do that until we get permission to go forward. The plan is to get all of the arrangements sorted and contracts in place by the beginning of February, and for the foundations to go down. The timber frame takes 3 or 4 days to put up, but isn't waterproof for about a month. But the timber frame is quite quick. The biggest thing is fit out, which can take 4 to 6 months. So I'm not naive. We're avid watchers of television and building programmes, and we know that they run behind schedule, not the time. And we run a consulting company on project management, so we know where it will go wrong, and we hope it won't, but we don't know.
Okay. Right. Does anyone else have anything to say on that? No. Now, you did want to comment on
I'll just ask a question of people here, actually, if I may. We, as you probably all know, Ashford sent a letter to potential objectors to this removal of the condition. And it was sent to anyone within what they reckon was a hearing distance, which is quite logical. So the rest of Wittersham didn't get this letter, just the people in the area around the thing. And so, in a sense, the only people who got an opportunity of objecting to this are the people who live in the immediate sound area, if I can call it that, from the social club. The other side of the coin is yourselves have all he proposed that this condition be removed. And I wondered, of the people who are sitting around here, how many of you are actually sitting or living in this sound area that I'm talking about? Or are you outside the sound area, like the rest of Wittersham, who never got a chance to say anything anyway? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand it. I don't know if we know. Paul is certainly outside.
Well, it's very easy to say.
Alan
If
is
you could put
certainly
your hands up,
outside it.
anyone who lives down the street.
I can hear
Well,
it.
our addresses are a matter of public record. I don't think we have to start, putting hands up and down. I
Some
really-
of us are
No,
more in
I'm
the
trying
middle
to
of
find
others.
You know.
what percentage of the parish
I'm
council.
trying to understand the relevance of the question.
Well, I don't know what the relevance is.
The relevance
in terms
is
of
that
straight
the
facts, we are
council-
scattered around.
Sent a letter to people who live in the potential sound area.
Which is pretty typical for a planning application.
Yeah, it's
isn't
quite
it?
good.
Yeah, okay.
You're not
We're dealing with planning applications all the time. that
But
might not be
from
near
your
us.
point of view, you're proposing it, in a sense, you're against the objectives. But how many of you are actually living in the sound area that's affected?
One is probably nearer than you are. Some are quite close, some are quite distant.
Yeah.
I'm average.
So we don't know. I don't know.
Well, with respect, our addresses, I think, are details on
They're
the
all
website.
listed.
Yeah, so you're very welcome as a
I don't
member of the
like
public
going
to...
that that's private, I think, and I don't like
No,
digging into
it's a matter of public record. I think you'll find that all councillors have to declare... All councillors have to declare their interests, including any property they
So if
own.
all I need to do now is to go around all the addresses to find out how many people are in that sound area.
Yeah, feel free.
It's open information.
Okay.
It all depends how what the ABC have actually done on the circle.
Yeah, I mean,
It all depends how far they've gone from the property.
well, they've actually listed the properties
Indeed.
who had a letter sent, and that's where I get my information from.
Yeah.
Because it's on the site, so I can just get a map.
And I will say quite openly, I live very closely and I've not received anything.
Oh, well.
I've not received
So this is why I'm asking the question,
Yeah, yeah.
that I'm within less than 100 yards.
But I mean, obviously I'm not responsible for the letter which...
No, I understand, but you're trying to make an argument. I'm saying there's a number of people, councillors, and I'm quite happy to be open about it, that I'm within 100 yards.
Well, all I know is that when I looked at the list, there are a number of addresses on Poplar Road which I assumed were the main road by the old jail, and most everyone on the south side of the street.
But I'm not sure that's true, because I live on Poplar Road,
Yeah,
very close.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's the difficulty you've got in this process, in fact, is that I had a view, which may be what you're expecting or not at this stage.
Yeah.
But I was conscious of what the expectations were going to be on that occasion. So I've not received anything.
Yeah. Well,
So it's difficult for you to judge, and it's difficult for a number of us to judge.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well our position as councillors is that, like it or lump it, we have the obligation as best we can to give a view, it's only a view, to Ashford. They have to consult us, they don't have to take any notice of what we say. I've no idea what they're going to do, incidentally. And you were right to say that we recommended that they lift the condition, which is for no amplified music, but we also then asked them to replace it with a condition that put time limits on it, because that seemed to be perfectly reasonable, and that's where it is. But now it'll depend on the planner who's got that job, a town and country planning specialist in Ashford, to make the decision on behalf of the Borough Council. All we do is give a view. Our view was to support it for the reasons that we said at the time.
Right.
So, can I then close the public session at this point? Yes, we close the public session and then we'll get on as council. You're all welcome to stay though and listen to our considerations, as long as you're quiet, please. Okay, so the minutes of the meeting, last time. Funny how there's always a Right, okay, can we carry on now, please?
No, I want to talk about it. Oh, you mean the one about
For the tape, as they say, almost everybody's gone.
Was it something you
Not
said?
not everybody.
So, the minutes of last meeting, did anyone have any concerns about any issues there?
No.
No.
Did that get done, by the way?
Yes.
It's good, excellent. Yes, I probably remember that part.
And
Right,
you-
I'm going
you
to
would
sign
have
it
been,
then.
that's why I didn't have a concern.
Yeah, I remember. Very rare. Okay, minutes are signed. Matters arising. One item, it says none there, I thought of after Yvonne and I had discussed that. I went to the highways seminar, the KCC annual highways seminar. It was on Zoom, unfortunately, and not a real one like we used to have. Not as good, but better than that. And I looked through my notes and picked out a few things just to mention. It was on the 13th of October. The experienced highways engineer that we had previously running the highways transport and transport department, who then got promoted to something slightly higher, I think covering waste as well, and now he's been promoted again, I think. Anyway, they've brought in a replacement. He was an ex-Highways England proper engineer. He's been replaced by a civil servant, ex-Environment Department, number 10, and Department of Transport. She's been working with Kent on projects of some sort, but she's a civil servant, not a highway engineer, which I thought was of interest. KCC is one of the counties that's been given enforcement powers by the government on certain road regulations. This has been in the press about whether they can enforce no right turns and things like that, including with CCTV. They've got the powers, but they have to say where they want to exercise them and get permission. And they've gone for 6, one of which is the bus gate, which I think means the one in Ashford, just by the railway line, up the back. I can't tell you exactly. I did come across it once when I was trying to follow my sat-nav and found I wasn't allowed through there because there's a no entry except for buses. They are therefore in a position to go ahead, or any time soon. They'll give warnings only for the first 6 months. After that's a £70 fine, or £35 if paid promptly. So bear that in mind. And they're going to look for another 15 or so across the county. Maybe another one in Ashford, maybe not. They have, sometimes I find these figures are quite interesting because they give us a sense, while we all complain about what the big councils do, at the volumes they have. 130,000 applications a year for permits for the utilities to dig up their roads. That's in 1 year, 130,000. 35,000 are for urgent or immediate work. I'm not sure if that's the ones that they can start even without a permit because they're urgent, like if you've got a big water leak. 15,000 of them need a road closure. New high-speed broadband that we all want is a lot of the extra work. And then on trees, they've got trees along 4,000 to 5,000 roads. They're checked every 5 years, unless it's a high-speed road, which is done annually. I'm not sure if our lanes, which of course are technically 60 miles an hour, count. I think they probably need dual carriageways. KCC's got 120,000 trees. The highways as a whole have got 550,000, but KCC doesn't own them all. 120 of theirs. Their replacement cost estimate is £66 million, 147 species, 20% of them are ash, and therefore most of them will be goners. Big issue. So that's all I have to say on the high risk. And there's a lot of other stuff, but you know, I think it's worth passing on.
Thank you.
Right. The other matter arising, which is just in the last couple of days, and I sent you some emails, but just to put it on the record here, I did ask the Chief Executive of Ashford Borough Council a year ago to give us a view in principle of whether they were interested in or willing to consider the parish council taking over the village green or the land adjoining the village green, or both. She took that away. I gave her maps and all the rest of it. 6 months later, I chased it up because we were having a meeting with the children's play area officer who came along, with also some residents. She was away, but the PA chased it up and found it had been passed to housing and from housing to lawyers, which was a bit premature because I was only asking for an idea in principle. She replied as soon as she got back to the office to say she'd chase it up, but I'm afraid I didn't hear again. So I chased it up over the weekend, and I've now been told they'd like a specific proposal that they can then consider, rather than me asking in principle, which seems to always be putting the cart before the horse and giving us a lot of extra work when they can then just sit on it for a while and turn it down. So I'm not very happy. It seems to be a very poor way of working, but perhaps that's the way councils do it. It was never that way in business.
What extra is involved in the actual proposal then? Because technically you've sent quite a few emails and told them with maps what you want to do. Is that not a proposal?
Well, I mean, you make a good point. It probably needs to be parcelled up a bit more, with a bit more gobbledygook,
Spending money on
and it all takes time. There's no one else to do it. And then they can sit on it for heaven knows how long and then say no. I did discuss it with the ward member earlier. It's not a good way of proceeding. In business, always one would start having early discussions, getting people's views, finding out whether it was actually something that could be done, should be done, could be afforded, whatever, and then you start saying, okay, now what have we got to do? Not the other way about. Sad.
Is it a financial argument they're looking for, do you think? Or?
My understanding, and I haven't gone into it in any detail, is that the Localism Act 2011, which has the right to transfer for the first time, so that councils can transfer assets between them, my understanding of it in principle is that because it goes from the public sector to the public sector, it generally doesn't need to be paid for. Obviously they can say, well no, we need it because, but all it is doing is sitting on their books for no value. I mean, no value to them.
There's a maintenance cost to them, isn't there?
A little bit.
But the principle of us taking that on, surely that's something that, you know, is something they can't ignore.
And I wouldn't even see, I mean, obviously we'd have to maintain it, but I wouldn't even necessarily seek to absolve them of that cost in some way, because, well, firstly, they've got more money than we have, but the principle really is that for us to have it, we can do more with it.
Yeah.
First thing is, we would certainly say to sort out the pond, which, if you remember, we took a lease on for 3 years for free, in case we could get a loan, a grant, a grant. We didn't get one, so we didn't do it. I would expect that we ought to be able to sort the pond out. I would expect that we ought to be able to make more of the village green, which is very rough for a village green. I would expect that one way or another we would start looking seriously at raising funds to put a play area of much more modern standard on the village green, rather than their one in the back corner, which they already don't want to spend any money on, but they have to occasionally. It was freedom of that. So that's the key argument really, is that it is just sitting there going nowhere under their own control, and if we did have it, we could do more. At least the village green, and preferably the rest. One of the things I think that they may be interested in is the idea someday that they can build houses. But you can't go across the village green by law. You can't get in from the other side, which has just been turned down again, the old S61. So how do they get into it?
So a couple of quick questions. One is there a template for the proposition, or do we have to kind of build it ourselves?
Well, that's a good point, I don't know.
Second thing is, and I've just forgotten the name, but the charity that we approached when we were looking to buy the village pub as a village asset, that funded the initial work, I'm trying to remember who it was. It's a very well-known charitable trust.
There's a P in it.
Yes.
Not people.
It's not the people,
I'll have it on
but
the
you're
email.
getting
I'll
close
have
to
it
it.
on
You didn't know it, yes.
But I'm just thinking to ourselves that what we're looking to achieve, as in improving life in the community, improving community assets, it's very much in their remit.
I suspect we couldn't get money from them. That's for community groups.
Well, we could make an inquiry. I've got the contacts on record from I just can't remember from the life of me who it is, but that would then say we'll get someone in. They sometimes give pro bono support rather than cash. So if we could get someone who does this sort of stuff, who's an expert in it, and say this is what we'd like to do, could we have 3 or 4 days of their time? We could accelerate this. At least we could give the recipient, shall we say, a well thought out, comprehensive document that addressed all the key issues, because we haven't got really the time or the expertise to do it ourselves.
The main thing really is to explain to them.
Yes, I got it for him, you see, that's why I can't remember. But I will.
I'm not sure it's in.
The main thing really is to try and persuade them while they're sitting there like, the sort of dog in a manger attitude, that they're not really giving anything away. Incidentally, when I first spoke to the chief executive a year and a couple of weeks ago, I did say that, and at that time they may have had hope value on housing, and I did say obviously there'd have to be a clawback. In other words, and there are legal terms for it, I can't remember what they are now, that basically if it ever did get houses, then they would want the majority of the money. We wouldn't have a free ride to flog it off for and incidentally, we couldn't flog it off for 20 houses without Ashford giving you planning permission. So, but it's a kind of no-brainer except to a bureaucrat.
Plunk it.
Right.
You see, the boys here, the boys do working good again.
So I think the
key foundation.
The key thing today, if the clerk agrees, because it's not named under the matters arising, is that at least you are all supportive that we carry on trying to do this.
I think
yes, I think we'd all agree.
Good, thank you.
Can I just say, when you were mentioning about the lease that we had, and it ran out, and Ashford said, would you like to renew it? And I said, yes, please. But nothing said.
But it's in the same pile in legal.
Yeah.
But in this case, I'm not looking just for a free lease. A free lease enabled us to apply for a grant. What it doesn't do is enable us to do what we want to with the land without keep asking them, which will then hold everything up again.
Let's move it forward.
Yeah, we'll try. It's in the pile then. Good. Right, so then we come on to the planning applications, and the first one is Anchor Barn, the living accommodation over the garage, a bedroom, a hobby's room, the high-level terrace and the external stairs, solar panels on the roof, falls within the Grade 2 curtilage of Lordings. There is concern, I think, potentially over a subsequent amendment from overspill to permanent living accommodation, and I did intend, and I then forgot to do it, to ask them what they thought about that. I think would certainly, my suggestion would be looking for a condition on that. But a condition doesn't stop it happening.
No.
But it's a start.
Has the barn been sold separately from Lord?
No, and it shouldn't be.
No.
It should definitely not be separable as well. Because that's the other thing.
So they own both, do they?
They own them both, yeah. It's not a barn really, it's the garage. But they built a barn as a garage.
Well, there's the house and the garage and the Oast House behind.
The Oast House is separate property.
There's Lordings, Anchor Barn and the Oast.
They all belong to the same people.
No,
they're
all.
Lordings sold it all off.
Is the converted barn, and then they've got the garage and gym, which is
and that's what they're talking about converting.
Indeed, exactly. So as I said, they only built this garage a few years ago. It's a modern building. It's got an upstairs, but they want to make it into livable as sort of granny annex, as he called it. I think actually in the paperwork it was for occasional overspill rather than even a granny annex.
That's right. Well,
That's what I forgot to ask actually, because you mentioned granny annex, but
Yeah.
as far as I'm aware,
Occasional overspill.
yeah, I
Which
don't
It could be
Yes.
just terminology, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a
I'm pretty
range.
sure they haven't got granny in it.
It could be a granny annex, as in what people call them. Yes. I think it's so that if people come and they
I was
want a
going
big
to say, it's
party,
guest
they've got extra room.
accommodation. Yeah. Yeah.
so what do we say?
Do people have a view?
I have no objection. I went through, I looked at the plans and what have you. There's no material difference, frankly. You know, it's
Stairs around the back.
Stairs around the back.
Or side and back.
You know, I think the fact that there are conditions already in place means that they can't sort of sell it off or what have you, or these things like changing it.
Okay.
I couldn't see any planning reasons to object.
Is everyone happy with that? So I think
Yes.
we should be then supporting it, but asking that it be conditioned
Yes.
that it is not for permanent accommodation and not separable from the main property.
On that basis, yes.
Yeah, or whatever the words for that are, which is what they were asking for.
Could it be used as Airbnb?
Well, that was something that I was saying to anyone that
There's nothing
I
to
think-
stop
But in a
it.
way, that would fall into that category. It just would be that they didn't know the people.
But we wouldn't object to that, would we?
Not particularly.
No.
You wouldn't want your granny living with you permanently.
no, and I think if their neighbours haven't objected, then
No.
I
there's
think
no
nothing.
reason.
The neighbours aren't very close,
Well, I used to do.
not compared to mine.
I used to do.
Pilates.
I can see you do.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. The class we used to do it in the grounds there.
Does it still happen there?
No,
No.
he's not with the lady. And I remember it being overlooked by one. So I guess if they haven't got a problem, then there's no reason that not to support.
So what's come to us? Okay. So that's Anchor Barn. Thank you. Land adjacent to 16 Lloyd's Green. The things I thought of at the time, I thought it was a sketchy application to be polite. I don't know what I've done with it now. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
Well, the way they've done it is just really rather careless,
It's
isn't
bonkers.
it?
It's
Well,
it looks very.
It's not even that much, is it?
It's just amateur stuff, really.
Yeah, it's just what you can do with a pencil and a ruler if
Yeah.
someone tells you to draw two houses on a bit of
They're
land.
giving it to a junior and says, look, just deal with this.
Yeah.
And,
I'm surprised it was even validated at Ashford as
Yeah.
a planning
I thought it was amazing it never got through.
Yeah.
yeah,
The
well,
first
I
stage.
don't think it has got through. It's got past,
There are
it's
some
got past us anyway.
Yeah, there are some fundamental errors in there. I mean, the drawings don't relate to the application.
Yeah, sure.
In that, the
5
application
bedroom, 4
states
bedroom.
flat roofs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I didn't see any drawings of flat roofs.
Yeah.
I think Nick's comment that it was crude, and I understand the context in it. I think it's not serious.
I think
Having heard the concerns tonight also with that
Yes.
driveway there, plus the fact that it possibly would seem that Southern Water are only now beginning to realise the
but they
situation.
didn't even know.
And certainly, would any of us buy a house that Southern Water would come on any time, night or day, dig up, whatever, drive it, traps around, and the foundations of the houses? I mean, it's just...
Potty.
It's a bit bizarre.
It is very, very strange, and I would not support it at all.
Agreed.
I agree.
Agreed.
Chairman, your comment about validation is actually just to prove that it's legal, not no comments on the quality of it or anything like that. That's the reason for validation,
Okay.
as I understand.
Okay.
What makes it legal? What's the...
Well,
They've had a check.
They've paid
They
for
paid
it.
the money, yes.
They paid the sum. Yeah.
There are other
I
reasons,
don't-
but that's the
yes.
matter, aren't they?
And the money's been banked quickly.
I increasingly was very worried about the residents today and the concerns that they have. I think the advice you gave was fine, but doing something and not sharing any information, my feeling is that the people really just wanted to get it accepted before anybody, and the kind of balloon bursted.
I think
And
they've
my
got,
feeling
they've
is,
got to get that application for the PROW in, I
Yes.
think.
yes,
Because there's always wiggle room later for them to
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, well it wasn't there, and
Yeah.
all this stuff.
so are we agreed then?
I
Can I just say, I have been told that there was a notice that the piece of land had a notice to say it was going up for auction, but the notice was taken down
Yes,
before everybody.
Within
had a
24
chance.
hours, I gather.
Yes, without. So, as far as Ashford were concerned, they put a notice up.
Somebody could have taken it down.
Somebody
Anybody-
took it down.
Yeah.
Presumably somebody who was keen to buy it didn't want anybody else to know.
Well, that's an assumption, but you could be right. Alan?
Couldn't possibly.
It's not planning. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I see. So you think it would have been whoever the
Well, I
auction?
don't know, I
The
mean,
auction.
they're pretty slow at putting signs up usually.
Southern Water did know that the property Southern Water had been sold.
Southern Water didn't know. They weren't informed, and neither were the Public Rights of Way team either.
See, but all good reasons.
It's all a bit shaky.
It does
Yeah.
sound
Shaky's not the
strange.
word.
I think when Yvonne puts her
Yeah.
response
If you
in,
sell a property, you have to advise the person who has the wailing. I wonder if...
Subject to all rights enjoyed by Southern Water
Do we know?
pumping station.
No.
Yeah,
When it was
I
sold.
think it may be.
Yeah, but they should have told Southern Water
Well, I
that.
suppose they
They
did, but
had something.
they found out
from-
the state
Yeah.
was right.
So I think they would have had to have said, yes, that's
Well, if you've got a
okay.
wailing going over your land, if you sell your land, you've got to advise the people who have the wailing legally.
okay,
Yeah.
let's
Mm.
see what
If you
Yvonne's
just
got
say,
there.
no one leaves it there.
Yeah. Which is, you know,
Right, I had.
But what would be the purpose of buying?
down the land. I can nothing to do with it.
Now they have it, so I'm not sure maybe the person who bought it thought it was just too good.
Yes, this came from Southern Water. I've been passed details of your concerns regarding the above planning application for review. I feel it may be helpful to explain that water companies are not statutory consultees on planning applications, and as you have quite rightly advised, we do not appear to have been consulted. Noting your comments regarding the Southern Water sewage pumping station located on this land, I have asked our planning consultation team to review the application and respond directly to Ashford Borough Council, detailing our findings from the developer's proposal and the proximity to our asset.
I suppose it's possible that Southern Water, while they own the hut and materials in it, don't actually own the land it sits on, so they won't even class as a neighbour technically. It's all bizarre.
They just don't consult the external firms.
Indeed. I think that Yvonne, in her response, because I think it's true that we're all
Yes.
opposed,
Yeah.
in her response, she might point out that as well as the pumping station dealing with the waste water of Lloyd's Green, which includes housing department properties and private, 24 or something, is it?
Well,
Yes,
altogether, there's 36
Oh,
of them.
36.
Not all of them flow through there.
Okay, but the ones nearest the road don't. A large number of the 36, but it's also understood that it deals with Jubilee Fields. A number of which, of course, are housing properties again. And the other thing that I thought was rather interesting, but it won't be in our response, is that the two houses, if you work out, they tell you how big it is, it's 500 metres. It's worked out at 14 houses per acre.
Okay.
Whereas Stocks Road, with 30 houses on it, is only 4.8 per acre, and the planners are asking them to reduce it. Bizarre, isn't it? Even one house on it is 7 per acre.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm not saying anything other than objecting and pointing out. We're not saying why we're objecting.
Oh no, we are. We're
Very
objecting. We're objecting because tell me if you want anything different. We're objecting because the application is insufficiently detailed to be able to decide. The density is too high for the land. There are problems with the pumping station. The access on the track is a PROW. And I think Jill made a very good point the other day. It's quite a long lane, and you're going to get people coming up and down at the same time.
Yes, that's right.
It's quite narrow to get past about 3 of the trees along there.
Yeah.
And it's going to potentially look into back gardens.
So has he got permission for agricultural vehicles on
For the one, yeah, indeed.
Mm.
Yes, for the one who's got the land at the end.
Yeah.
Who of course also put into a house, but it would only be one person.
Yes.
Because one of them along there does actually take a vehicle up there, they're not supposed to.
Well, one of what?
The
What's
house, the
not-
house with a gate on the left hand side, isn't it?
Well, you can't stop them.
I understand the point. Okay.
You want to see the size of the house they built?
It's well extended, isn't it? Okay, is that enough?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I would like to think that it won't go anywhere, but it can always be appealed. Oxney Isle Barn then. New house in the countryside, close to the existing hamlet of buildings spreading to the west of the current Wittersham Manor Grade 2 listed. NPPF, as we were told, Section 80 calls for restrictions on isolated houses in the countryside, but it allows exemptions. And let me read out the key words from the fabled NPPF. Planning policies and decisions should avoid the development of isolated homes in the countryside. First thing is it isolated when it's next door to about 6 others? Which is Wittersham Manor coming across. If you look at this really quite useful picture, here we are. This is the one they live in at the minute. This is where they want to build. There's the granary, and then there's about another 4 or 5 houses all in a row. I mean, they're spread, but they're relatively close. It's in a little hamlet.
But
So-
the very nearest one, the granary.
They're supportive.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
So
So the first thing is,
The nearest one's supported at the
Oh,
application.
nearest.
Yes,
Yeah.
so the first thing is you should avoid development of isolated homes. Is it isolated? Of course, it's as isolated as you want it to be. Then the following the exemptions are if the following circumstances apply, and there's one that is key. E. The design is of exceptional quality in that it is truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture and would help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. And, not or, would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area. Well, plainly, it doesn't immediately be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area in certain ways, because, you know, like Wittersham Manor's 600 years old or 400 years old. But then again, if it was doing that, it wouldn't then be the highest standards of architecture. This is being built to be terribly low energy, low this, low that, and incidentally a low building as well.
He did make a very interesting point that the design advice was
Yes.
was such that
But it
the
meant-
variation of roofs reflected the small barns and buildings in the area.
That's true.
I'd never heard that, but I thought it was a really interesting point.
I think that is true, but it's also the fact that if it was just a bungalow
Yeah.
with a long roof on it,
Yeah.
it looks more massive.
Yeah.
The more, as they like, architects always like
Like
to
the one
talk about
diagonally
massive.
opposite me,
Yeah.
Mrs.
So-
Whip.
So if you put a little bit here, there, and everywhere, it breaks up the whole look. Which indeed, I mean, go and look at Bud's house. Bud's house is higgledy-piggledy, bits everywhere. It's a big house, but it doesn't look huge because it's got bits all over the place. So that's the wording of the NPPF. It has been the subject of this advice, as we heard. They are architects and ecologists and all the rest of it, and well above our pay grade, I suggest. And that'll be assessed by planners. a number of the nearby residents have written, and you've seen those, and they've made, as Paul said, they've made coherent points about ecology, access, archaeology, drainage, the point about the water going down to Mr. and Mrs. Metcalfe's, Mrs. mother and the son, unquestionably true, but as long as it rains in this country, that will keep happening, whether they build the house or not. If it makes it worse, it's only because, in my engineering view, they've taken a small piece of the soakability of the land out, where what lands on the house would have had a chance to soak in. Some of it would still have run off into the ditch because of the sloping field, but some could have soaked in. That won't happen anymore. But out of 3.5 acres, how big is the house? It's, I don't know, 1%. I don't think that actually makes a big difference.
Who owns a private drive?
I presume, we didn't ask that, I presume it's the Blackbrook Farm.
Blackbrook Farms.
And they've got a right of access over it, and they're only going to use the same little right of access over the first little bit before they turn into the other one, which they're on at the minute, and then off of that.
Well, that's why I asked the question about the quality and the strength of the road and what have you, because that was something that Harry had put in, I think it was him or the other chap, about the concern that the weight would put it down, but actually David's point about the fact there's some heavy duty. I mean, you know, if you've got any agricultural property, you're going to have every now and then some big lorries coming over it on that. I think, are we making comments?
Please do.
I mean, to me, I thought that it was really interesting hearing David.
Tell you what, let's make comments first, and then we'll vote on it.
Up you go.
Well, I was going to say that I just thought it was very interesting hearing the depth of the applicant's explanation, the fact that people have bothered to write those. I mean, it's a difficult one, I think. It's interesting hearing that this has been. It's not something that's been sort of done in the last month or 2 or 3 months or what have you. It's been going for a long time, and he's clearly approached it with significant professional advice. The piece about biodiversity resonates very strongly with me. That is coming in next year, and the fact is they're going to be way over the target of 10% anyhow. I think the thing about to me, very often it's around architectural relevance and how it fits in, as well as technical merit. The technical merit, any new house being built at the moment, being sustainable in terms of light and power and so on, and insulation, that's obviously there. Architectural merit is highly subjective. You know, one person's design is not another one's necessarily, but the fact that he's taken advice and that bit about the different levels and what have you, which one of the objectives seemed to sort of make the point that it's all higgledy-piggledy. Well, you know, that's a classic, and he's taken advice that it isn't just a block like the sort of south fork look. I think that those are the comments I would make at the moment.
Leslie?
Yes, I mean, I agree with Paul that it's not an easy one to judge on, because reading the objections, particularly from the farm, you can understand the concerns, and I mean they're not just making arbitrary comments to be difficult, which it sometimes seems to, but for the sake of not wanting anything to happen, but they seem fairly valid. However, I mean, surely this is the sort of new build that we need to encourage.
That's the logic of Section 80, I think. I mean, the problem is that we can easily get into the situation of saying, well, you can't do anything anywhere.
Exactly.
There's no question that it does not look like what is around it. That's the fact of it.
But then most of the
then on
village
that
doesn't
basis,
look
are we
like
just
what's
going to
around
only
it.
build what they used to build 300 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 150, whichever it is? Of course, by the way, the design panel, having architects on it, like to see nice new modern architecture, because that's how they work. the archaeologists, if they were asked, would say, oh, we've got to honour the archaeology and go looking for it all. And that's also true. Anyway, Colin.
Just to say that, I mean, what I was interested in was the member, the worker there who talks about the ecology and the difficulties and what he perceives as what they'll lose if this building is built, basically, and that they will suffer, and there will not be the same kind of creatures or anything else around over time.
And will that be a temporary thing because nature finds its
Well,
own
that could well
answers?
be, but I'm just making the point.
But it could-
In fact,
it
he
could knock
feels
it
very
back.
strongly.
It could knock it back through.
Yeah, and he's questioning the reports that they've had because he himself is qualified.
Yeah. Okay. Sue?
I'm quite impressed with what the applicants had to go through to get to this point. I mean, he's taken everything on board. And we have got another new house that's been done down Pallister Court Road, which is very, very modern, isn't it? That one.
Meadowgate, yeah.
That's very modern, so.
Sure. Alan?
So I think what's happened here is that the Allen brothers have looked at this plot and they thought, well, we'll never get it, but let's have a go. And so they've gone along and they've found quite a fancy architect who doesn't really understand the conservative nature of the population of Wittersham. And he sort of said, well, let's give it a go. We can do this. Yes, we can design something that will appeal to the local population. And he's got swept up in it. He must have spent a lot of money, I suspect, on this. I mean, it must have cost him a great deal, I would suspect, to get this far. And he's got swept up in the enthusiasm of the architect's office, I suspect. And then I've looked at the letters that have come in and so on, and it is a difficult one. Goodness, I know which way I'm going, but I'm not going to say yet.
Okay, so.
I agree. I've read Harry and Patrick's letters, which I thought were fabulous, and raised some really great points. And I had quite a distinct view of when I come in, but I have to say, having heard the applicants sort of kind of raised every single point and made a great argument against it. I was going to mention Meadowgate as well because I don't think the design is particularly sympathetic to the area. It will maybe stick out like a sore thumb. However, I thought maybe that about Meadowgate, and now it's there and it's got a bit weathered, and I actually think it's beautiful, and it seems to fit in really well with the landscape. I was a bit concerned with maybe the timeline which I asked. I thought, gosh, if it's going to be a year, 2 years, and it drags on, it's going to have a huge impact on the wildlife. But nature does find a way, so it sounds like it's addressed a lot of those concerns, and they're going to try and resolve that as they do it. It does sound quite genuine in what they're saying. So, yeah, difficult one.
I think I share everyone's view that it's not easy, and I can see that coming in advance. I share people's view that the applicant has put up a very solid argument tonight. But we've also heard the alternatives from Mrs. Metcalfe. The fact is that the NPPF 80 has a way ahead for building buildings in the countryside, but it doesn't say you can build an isolated, if it is isolated, house in the countryside that looks like the others, simply. It's got to be, whatever the wording was, truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, and will help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. That's national policy. It then does, of course, say, but it's got to be sensitive and sympathetic. Well, you can give ticks in the boxes there for the roof. They've broken up. It's not only the roof, by the way. The roof goes in different directions, but it's actually not got long straight lines either. It's sort of all a bit zigzaggy as well, to use a technical term. So, and Ashford's gone along with this. I don't know how much Ashford manage, or if at all, the design panel, or if it's totally independent. But it's a system somewhere or other that is put together to manage these cases, and that's what they've gone through. I'm concerned, as Alan was hinting at, that if you can't get this sort of thing through, I'm not saying that it should be an open and shut case to grant it, just because they went through a lot of work. But if it's impossible to get it through because of all the things you can see, like it doesn't look like a Victorian barn converted into a house, then, or before it was Victorian, if you can't get that through, then the whole system was at fault for ever encouraging them to try. It would be, in fact, disreputable.
Except that the architect might get the enthusiasm and
I understand
ignore all the other outside.
Well, but then again,
influences.
the panel has said, yeah, we think this ticks the box for.
It's also a net gain of a house, because they could have knocked down their existing house and built on that plot potentially, which other people have done.
Yeah.
But this is actually a net gain of a house in an area which is woefully short. I mean, and we're getting shorter and shorter. You know, it's just, the facts are all there.
Well, I suppose I won't say that. So let's vote on it. Who is in favour of supporting it? I think I am. It's difficult, but I think I am.
It's very
given
difficult.
everything. That's 3. And who is for refusing it? Sorry, objecting to it? 2, 3 objecting, 3 supporting, and an abstention.
No.
Who abstained?
Possible.
Oh, did Leslie
No, I
support
supported it.
I didn't see your hand.
I support it.
I support it.
So it's 4 support.
You better have a recount then.
It's 4 supported, 3 objected. I applaud everyone for the.
Well, in fact, you've got the casting vote here.
We didn't get to it. It's 4-3. It would have been if Leslie.
Can I make a suggestion that with that, and I don't know how we phrase this, but all the things that we've heard, all the concerns that David was addressing with his very careful plans, and I'm thinking mainly in terms of drainage, not any aesthetics, but in terms of drainage and access. Okay, I think we.
And water.
Well, that's what I meant. Water, and I think we really want to reinforce that building control have to be real sticklers to make sure that nothing is skimped on this. You know, because at the end of the day, the issues of biodiversity and ecology is a matter of opinion. You can always find an expert to argue one side, and then equally you can find another one on the other side. But I think that if they stick to what seemed to be in the plan, that the driveway is made safe, that the bank isn't going to collapse, that the amount of trees that he says he's planted already and is going to, so all of the bits that are in there, above and beyond just building a house, you know, I think that would be really important to put in our override, if you like, our comments, if we can find a way, Yvonne, of phrasing that, which I'm sure you'll be able to do.
Jeremy? I mean, this is one of those projects that's got a long way to run. We're only seeing the very lower end. It's got a long way to go. And how do we now? I mean, I'm sure I know the answer to this really, but we now present our view. How does that release itself to the village? Remind me. Are we named by the way?
It'll be an outlook next month, because I'll have to write a piece.
And is it itemised how the parish council voted? Who in particular voted?
No. Actually, I was saying about outlook, that normally just goes on Yvonne's table.
Does the general public get to know who voted for and who voted against? Apart from except that we only put our hands up, and that's not on video.
Yes,
But it would be 4-3, isn't it?
Do a roll call.
No, I don't think we should. I mean,
I was going to say, why
I mean, Jill's here, of course, and she's listening.
Well, the information is publicly accessible. But what I think we have to be careful of is when that question, I could see where that was coming from about the amplification piece. Don't forget the last meeting, I think there, when I raised a bit about, so it is all about banning any form of amplification, May Day, sports days, school events, or anything like that. And the lady in the front row, Mrs. Phillips, said publicly to me, don't be so ridiculous, or you're being ridiculous. I am wary when people start picking out, because you and I have had accusations before, right? Because we live at the other end of the village, therefore we have no interest in anything.
Me too.
You know, and I think the point about it all is that we reach a considered decision and we do it carefully, and our decision is as a parish council, rather than individuals having to step forward and say, well, I voted for this and I voted for that.
I mean, on this particular one, I've had private representations from both sides, and you know, I've hedged my bets, and I'm not saying for the microphone to hear or to see which way I've gone on this. I'm not going to say now, but there it is, and I'll probably get more representations now we have made our recommendation.
I think the key thing is that something like this, where the applicants and the objectors have put in some very careful, considered points.
Yes.
When we comment on it in the Outlook, for example, I think it's worth a paragraph to say that we're putting comments, if you like, or conditions of our vote. You know, this is our vote, as it was, and by a majority, and we want to reinforce the key aspects of the planning application that they are actually fulfilled. And then I think we can be seen to take it seriously.
Yes. Yes.
And it's all recorded, and I think it's quite clear that we've done this one quite difficult, so anyone listening in, they're maybe not going to sort of judge us on
that was always on part.
Chairman, I'd like to leave in shortly, and just as a parting suggestion, when this is all over, irrespective of which way it goes in Ashford, it would be very interesting, at least for this council, and probably for others, as you're chairman of Carpet at the moment, if you could get David to write out a synopsis of the way he got this. Because in that fact, it's been before 3 design panels.
Yes.
And the first one, it got slated clean out the window. I mean, I sat there, well, you haven't got a chance, but that's it. I mean, Yvonne watched it as well. It was right out. And he's come back to it and listened and listened and listened.
Changed.
Oh, yes.
Doing it right, does seem very...
I mean, it's up to the planning department as to whether they consider it right, ultimately.
But this is the big thing.
But I think the information that he's obviously got up here in getting there would be quite useful to a lot of parish councils. Because particularly the rural ones, we don't get many town parish councils, other than one in Tenterton.
There's always one way.
It's called a town council.
That's because they've got an old chain.
Shush, I'm going before I drop myself in.
Right, nice to see you, Mick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, on we go.
Hi,
Joe.
Bye, Joe.
Yeah, okay.
Take care. Yeah. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night. Okay, Memorial Garden Working Group, Madam Clerk.
Yes, this was a letter, email, sorry, I received from Leslie Bliss on behalf of her little group. We wondered if a cherry tree would be a good choice of tree to plant to replace the one lost. Recently, 7 cherry trees were planted at Windsor Castle, reportedly Her Majesty's favourite residence. These new trees join the first trees planted by Her Majesty and the King when he was Prince of Wales. Hope's Grove, the Tenterton Base Nursery, favoured by Alan Titchmarsh, have some beautiful ones in their catalogue, and they have a sale on at the moment. That was the middle of October.
Whereabouts was it in the garden?
Well, they wanted the fir tree taken out.
Oh, I see, right, I did pick that
And-
up.
the entrance.
Yes,
Yeah,
but that's...
So not to replace the one lost where it was lost?
Well, I'm not sure, because obviously, yes, the ones that the children vandalised and killed. Because we decided with the fir tree, and Leslie knows with the fir tree that we're going to, I was going to take the bits off, we're going to see whether it regenerates.
Sure.
But it would be silly to plant another one exactly there. So whether you want to go with putting one back where there was one before.
But should you do that? Put it in the same place?
Well, this is the one that...
Should you?
This is one that, the children, it didn't really do anything because the children didn't really
there's a
give
mixed
it a
feeling on
chance
that.
to.
Yes.
Because if you leave some of the old routes in,
Where
then
it was
Sorry,
where the, where Memorial Garden goes into Coronation Field, where the Churchill Oak is, sort of around that sort of area, to try and separate the two areas a bit.
I think a cherry tree is terribly appropriate. I think it's a good idea, and I think the Queen liked them, and they grow well here. And important to choose the right one, because some of them are terribly prone to fungal infection and things these days because they've been too inbred.
Right.
But if they choose the right one, then I can give you a name if it's any help.
Go on then.
Amanagawa, it likes it here, and it's got very pretty blossom. And it was one that was conveniently, Collingwood Ingram, he was the one who hybridised it, so to speak. Got Collingwood Ingram at Bennington, so it's got good local provenance.
It's got local roots.
Yeah, exactly.
You get it, not you.
I was still getting over Alan's comment on the local population that they suffer.
Conservative population.
No, the local population that suffer fungal infection through being too inbred.
So, are we in agreement?
Did I say that? I don't think I ever said that.
Not during surgery hours.
Fungal infection. You saw. What did I say?
Pretty much that.
Pretty much that.
No, I didn't.
I think in our wonderful language it's actually context we're talking about.
So where do you think, are we going to say in that sort of area that it was before?
Which area was it in?
As long as the root's dug out properly, that's the
Yes.
important thing. Is if you just chop it down and leave some of the root knocking around, that's not a good idea.
Right, okay.
You've got to make sure the root's dug out properly.
I was going to say, surely it's a much bigger job to put it where the fir tree is because you've got to get.
Oh no, we decided not
That's
to
right,
have a tree because
yeah,
it was too near the gate.
Okay.
To have another tree there, but
Sorry, out of interest, is our tree warden involved in the discussion?
no, this hasn't been.
Is it not? I mean, out of respect for him,
Plastic.
would it not be a good idea
It would be politically sound to do so, wouldn't it?
And get their advice on where to put it.
Chris Teasdale should be involved because he could easily, perhaps, he's not the sort of man who gets offended, but he would be understandably offended if we ignored him.
And I've got no idea where it would be best placed.
Good idea.
I think the answer here then is to leave the clerk to liaise with our tree specialist on the council, Dr. A. Lloyd Smith, and the caretaker, and the tree warden, and the person who hybridised his tree.
Well, he's dead.
Whoever it was that you said.
Collingwood Ingram.
Right.
Well, that's a job for the church warden then.
And come up with an answer.
If it's positive,
That's
they'll
what
be allocating an amount of money for the job.
Yes. Do we have an idea of cost?
It won't be a huge amount.
They're probably £25. Well, they're more than that.
So
Yeah.
What about the root
I
canal?
was just thinking,
plus a
I
stick.
was hoping we wouldn't have to have another committee meeting to decide how much you say. We'd all do it one
I
go.
know, Colin.
It's within her delegation, and
Good.
I'm working on this.
yeah, she can afford a stick and some fertiliser. Right, next one is Squire. Notice a price increase.
yes, been notified.
That's the accounts package.
Yes, yes, there's a new prices come into effect from the 1st of November, but we know that price changes can be challenging, so the increase will not come into effect until your next renewal date on or after the 1st of April. We wanted to let you know now rather than at your renewal date, as we know that you will shortly be discussing your budget.
Could you?
And it's gone from what to what?
Well, this is what I found that I haven't actually. They've said that the new subscription, it would be £61.20 per month, but we pay it annually. So when I multiplied it out, it came to £734.40, which is the cemetery one as well, which is exactly what we paid this year. So
that's good.
So yes, I don't know exactly. Do I mention it or do I just say okay?
Right, we went up a year early. Okay, working party reports, caretaker.
This is just to say that I was going to couple of things with the van. The ABS and the echo warning lights are coming on, so it's booked in for tomorrow. That's into, and it looks like it's got needs a new clutch. So that will be next month.
We will come on, of course, in a year or two we'll be looking for a new van.
Yes.
Because it was quite old when we bought it.
And the MOT is due in December as well, so he's going to get those two booked in at the same time.
Have we done anything about the second dustbin outside Dax?
It's on my list.
Is it? Oh.
Just like the mirror was on my list.
Okay.
Is that your personal?
Right.
No. It's just rubbish keeps coming across the road.
Colin's going to put his bin out the front and people can use that.
Yeah.
Right, the finance monthly transaction statements, if people have had the opportunity to look at them, they came out.
Sorry, Sam, you're
That's all right. Can I sign them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And the caretaker one, which is just part of the other one.
Yep.
It ends up looking really long because with the way Scribe works, I have to break everything down. So instead of just having clerks' expenses and what it is, because it goes to different things to get the VAT back, it makes it slightly more complicated. So that's why it looks like lots of transactions.
Right, planning, we haven't had any decisions.
Yes, we have.
Oh, we have now.
Yes, it's come in. And in fact, this is the way that their new system works. I heard from Nicholas, I haven't heard from Ashford, but I checked, the land south of 63, the street has been granted with conditions for the barn and stable.
Good.
Or 3 stables.
Good.
That's all right.
I'm sure he's delighted.
Got no faith in Ashford now.
No, he's already lost faith in us.
You've offered a free riding lesson.
Open spaces. One of the open spaces has just been sold.
And the lead on open spaces has just left the room. I don't think he's anything to report.
Nothing to report.
Okay, highways. They are digging up the path just around by the Swan, which I reported about 3 or 4 months ago when I decided that one was getting very close to falling in the road because it went in a slope.
We seem to be having an awful lot of the B2082 closed. Like last Wednesday again, when people couldn't get through to Tenterden.
Well, interestingly, I spotted it because walking, so I spotted the notice. So when I got back, straight on to Darren, I got a road closure, nobody knows anything about it. I went on to One Network, which is the site.
It wasn't on there, was it?
It wasn't on there.
Because I did the same.
I didn't hear anything back from Darren, but then on my way to Maidstone on Thursday, I missed a call. Then when I got back home, I found that there was a message from Highways to say that their engineer had come out on Thursday. In fact, as I was coming through the village, there was a Highways vehicle coming the other way, and I thought at the time, they've been out and no signs, because Thursday, obviously, it was only there for the day. So they said, he couldn't find anything, so not quite sure what I was talking about. So I went back and said, well, I'm sorry, but it was just for one day. So nobody knew, but apparently this chap did come out, and he came in here to see, was looking for me, because obviously he couldn't get me on the phone. He put Calm here, and he was asked,
Well, judging by what we were told at the highway seminar, it could have been one of these where they're entitled to just get on with the work and,
obviously
and have to give notice within 2 hours. Because Claire Sharrock, who lives at Peening Quarter, was putting on next door not long after the initial report. Oh, it's all gone.
Well done, yeah.
So anyway, I did do what I would normally do, but it's...
I fear part of the problem, as you know, Sue's in effect complaining about, is the fact that if you close a road in Islington, you've got to go 100 yards up the road and down the next one.
Yeah.
And if you do it here, you can be on a 10-mile diversion.
Very well and
there isn't
truly.
another one.
Well, we have notice of your closure. I noticed the 21st of November.
You're saying they're putting in a water name or something.
Yes, I can put that on
Is
next
that just
door.
for the day, or there must be? I bet it take more than a day.
I do feel highways have lost it. I came back from Canterbury late yesterday between Charing and Biddenden, and there were at least 10 attempts to get me to go off the main road, saying diversion this way and diversion that way. We just went straight on, and nothing stopped us.
No.
But they were trying to get me to leave the main road every few hundred yards.
Right.
But this is what happened last Wednesday. Some people were getting through,
Yes, yeah.
and others were being turned round. It was absolute chaos.
Out of
I did
interest,
point that out.
I know it's outside of our patch, but when you go through Small Hive, the remnants of the vehicle that's been left on the back,
Still there,
with its registration plate.
And
Yes.
something,
There's been turns.
Whose responsibility is
Doubtless if you identify who it is.
Well, yes. Well, I haven't, no. But the fact is that who should be clearing that away? Is that Ashford?
I think it's the clerk to the parish council.
It wouldn't be Ashford anyway.
it could be valuable on bargain hunt.
All right, come on. PROWs?
Nothing really. It's going to be really money out there tomorrow.
Cemetery and churchyard?
Wet,
Wet?
wet.
There's the next parish council meeting, we know. Items for information. We'll go round because I've got
Update, hang
one.
on.
John,
Update next meeting.
13th
Is that the
December.
Christmas?
Yes, but
Is that
I'm
the
going
Christmas
to
party?
refreshments.
Are we going to do that? Yes.
We're going for the mince pies and the...
Yeah. I was just wondering, do we have enough money in the
It's the chairman's allowance for only left.
Yes, yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
It's either that or starting to bake.
Yeah.
But what?
We're not going to get many people, are we?
Well, that's what we
Oh, I don't know.
So obviously
That's right.
you know,
It's what planning application is.
as regular village entertainment goes, we could be creeping up the ladder. Yes.
Yeah.
To look at it, the improvement tonight.
But I'm not going to do crisps and peanuts because I don't like people putting their hands in.
Right.
Not now.
Yeah.
There was a time it
No,
didn't
you
matter,
do,
but,
I think that's
but not
right.
anymore.
Yes, I mean there have been all sorts of medical surveys done, you know, peanuts on pub bars and so on, and you know
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
an urban
good. It's
myth,
not
I think.
you don't want to go there. So
Well, I've decided
Nice to see you, Mr. Bond.
yeah, we don't want
I'm not going down that road.
Okay, items of information. Do you want to start us off, Yvonne?
Right, yes. I was going to go to it, but the planning portal training that came up, but I did it online instead because there weren't any trains yesterday. Have most of you used the new planning portal?
I've tried to, yeah. But
Try
no,
it.
I have used it. You have used it.
I wish they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Just got used to the old one.
Yes.
Yeah, they have,
It's
now
hard
you've
work.
got,
Yes.
Yes.
you've got the public register
Yeah.
and then you've got the consultee portal, which are different. So I'm logged in, so when I go into it, I get a different thing. It tells me what I've got outstanding. It knows that it's me. So if I want to communicate with the officer, like the first planning application that was on here, the Anchor Barn one, we were beyond the date. It was 3rd of November they needed comments. But there was no planning officer. So when I used to go straight to the planning officer, can we have an extension? They came back, usually yes. That wasn't a problem. But now, of course, the letter I get, and even if you go online, you don't see who it is. But if I go into my comments and put in, please can we have an extension, when a planning officer is appointed, they will see that. It doesn't go on to the ordinary list. So I can communicate with the planning officer that way. When other people put comments on, we did say about that there was talk about the documents that you now have to download each time. That will stay. That's not going to change. That's just one of those things with this system. You can't change. If you put something in, you now have to go in and say you want to say it something else as well. You can't just say take that out. You've got to do it as well as. What else? The public's comments have to be vetted. So they go into what they call the back office. So they don't go on probably up to 5 days before they will actually appear on the portal. So that's why, people's comments don't go on straight away. they're saying the search tool is a lot better, but the criteria that you have to put in is important. So you know when you say you put in a number and you get all these others beforehand, you've got to click on the bit below where it says the number and just put in planning applications, and then you will just get the planning applications without the building control and appeals and all the rest of it. The site history links that you used to get is something they're working on, so they haven't got that yet. The consultation subscription, which is, did you used to get it on the weekly list that used to come through?
Yeah.
Did you get that? Well, this is something that they're working on now, but they have said that they will be robustly testing it before it actually goes live.
I wonder why they stopped.
But they will be. It's something that this system doesn't normally do, so they're working. So they, you know, it's not something that's going to happen. So all in all, you know, it sort of was quite useful finding out just those things as to what they're thinking of doing.
And how do we find the recording?
I'll have to send it to you.
Oh, okay. There was a recording of what Yvonne watched.
You did send something out about the training.
Yes, because anybody could go to it, and they can do another one if they want to as well. But I do have the slides and a recording if you'd like me to send that on to you. Anybody else want it?
No, fine, not for me. I've managed to find.
I've
done it to a level of. Now I know that I'm not missing out on being advised because we're not being advised. That's it's fine for me at the moment.
Right, Sam?
Church time.
No.
Paul.
Church hall, yeah. The
Well,
AGM?
No, only that the AGM was fairly successful. I think we had about 12 people who attend. It wasn't successful in that no one volunteered for the roles, so I still the bookings clerk, treasurer and secretary.
I gave Mike 2 suggestions for treasurer to consider, but one of them I'm told probably no good anymore because she's moved to Tenston. The other ones are maybe still.
Oh, okay. Mike's lovely wife is Elizabeth Crawley, so he's been a little bit off the radar. So and Mike obviously has been voted in as chairman, but yeah, I think it all went quite smoothly for the first one back for us as a committee, and the first back after COVID. So yeah, all the regular users and quite a lot of one-offs is going smoothly. We still struggle a little bit with the cleaner, so we're looking at that. Hopefully, getting a person as well.
Good. Good. I mean, it seems much more solid than it was. Just could do with getting that bit of the work off you. Sue?
Something I've just suddenly thought perhaps it should have come under churchyard. We have a PCC meeting Thursday evening. Oh, on the
As you know, I'm going to be away.
yes, on the agenda, it's got clearing the rocks and boulders.
Yes.
You've seen that? I
Well,
presume
that's me. That's
it's
me.
where the new fence is.
No, it's not.
It's not that
No, I
one.
can tell you what that is, if you're interested. Round the back by the toilet block.
Oh, that's fine.
Up against the block, up against the wall in 2 places, there are a whole pile of rocks and boulders.
That's fine. I thought it was round that.
And I mean, John Underwood, the last architect and the current, are saying you shouldn't put things against the church wall. So I have said to Jennifer, if PCC would like it, over the winter, would they like me to clear them all?
So it's not
Because
that
they
new
shouldn't,
fence.
they shouldn't be there.
Sell them off.
No.
Holy relic.
No, they're bits of concrete and stuff.
Oh,
I mean, nobody's going to want to do them. They just sling them in this
buy
park.
them on eBay.
Hardcore. Yeah.
Buy them on eBay.
There's
That's
some,
a great
you
deal,
on
eBay.
next door sometimes, you see people offering hardcore.
I mean, this is big lumps of all sorts of things. So,
Perfect.
I mean, I'm going to go along with my tractor during the winter and just clear it.
Good.
If the PCC says yes, which they probably will, because they're silly not.
Okay. Do you have any other AOB, Alan? Do you have any other AOB?
No, I don't. No. Apart from stacking chairs.
That's excellent.
Yes.
None.
No.
Okay. Sam's done the village hall, so all I'm going to do is whiz through the police meeting for the bits that are of potential interest to you or to my own. This was the CALC 6-monthly meeting with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Assistant Chief Constable, local policing. Since the CC, the Chief Constable left Kent to take a national appointment a month or so ago, then the normal ACC local policing has stepped up to be Deputy Chief Constable and Deputy, and so we got a new one doing local policing now, who was the Chief Superintendent in charge of CID and crime, and he is now temporary ACC. He can't get the job as ACC yet because he hasn't done the national
training,
strategic police leadership course. But he was very good, I thought. Very good, very clear, very straightforward, had confidence in him. The charge rate in Kent Police is about the middle nationally in the league table. Not very high in most people's minds, but it is, they're not low, they're not high, they're fairly middle. Court backlogs are their big problem at the minute.
yeah.
The Police and Crime Commission's annual policing survey was underway. This, by the way, was on the 14th of October, so it's nearly a month ago. He'd at that time had 1,400 replies. He's had 3,000 in the past, so hopefully he's going to get more. Recruitment for the new chief is underway. Interviews are going to be another week or so from now. And then the choice that he makes has got to go to the Police and Crime panel for ratifying. I told you before the neighbourhood policing model was being changed, but at that point they still couldn't tell us what it was because it was being consulted on. In terms of numbers, we've got 500 officers and 35 managers doing neighbourhood policing. These are big numbers.
Aren't they?
Community engagement and geographic ownership remain core ambitions, which is good. We want both of them. Geographic ownership meaning that you know who it is. The CSUs, the community safety units, continue working with partners to solve problems that matter to the public. That's where the police work with Kent and Ashford and the NHS and all the rest of it. They are putting money in, if this all goes ahead as planned, more warranted officers into the CSUs, the community safety units. Local policing as a whole, that means the community safety units and what they call local policing, which are the people who can get in a car and rush around to what goes on, 3,000 officers.
That's what they got. What's the vacancy factor then? Do you say?
Don't know. Some PCSOs will be retained, but a lot less than before. Overall, there'll be 4,145 officers by March, but when the new ones come in for March, they spend the first 22 weeks in training. The Rural Task Force, which I don't have a lot of time for, and I hope you do, that's going to remain.
Good.
And in answer to my question, they will be ring fencing staff as a core principle. Obviously depends on emergency.
Yes, it is.
To make sure that officers who will now be warranted in many cases don't all get withdrawn or what they call extracted to other duties from neighbourhood policing. Because that's my fear, that they all go off somewhere else.
Well, they will do if there's an emergency somewhere else.
101 issues, they know they've been bad in recent months. It's acknowledged by the PCC. It's no reflection on control room staff. Post-COVID, the 101 calls have been a problem, but also they've had problems with a service provider, a high vacancy rate, a high turnover of staff. It's hard work, they're not highly paid. They've got a big recruitment drive. It will always be important to have 101, and it is a national product. They have to have it.
You have to.
But live chat, they say, is really good. They know the online form may be forbidding, and they're trying to improve it to get people to use live chat more. The temporary assistant commissioner, he was IC control room for 2.5 years before COVID, and the chiefs, he said, were looking at the 101 performance the week after a meeting. Better recruitment lately. 900,000 contacts a year to the control room, mostly by phone. That's hard to get your mind around. Even when you divide it by 365 days, that's one hell of a lot.
But there's a lot of problems with retention in that section.
So 900,000 contacts contacts, that's 370,000 divided by 999s, 400,000 101s, and then the rest of it will be presumably live chats.
a day.
3,000, I think.
900,000.
900,000
Yeah.
live chats.
Yeah, okay.
Under 3,000, but it's still, and it'll be a bit lumpy. That's, but
Plus
there's
the
a lot
fact
of people there.
their biggest problem is they're losing officers to the Met because
Well, that's what I was getting
about
at.
£7,000 to
They're
£8,000
giving them extra money, yeah.
Yeah, with the allowances and the salaries.
That was what I was
Indeed.
indicating.
No, they're aware of that, they talked about that. 1% of all the 999 calls are missed, meaning that someone puts the phone down before they get
That's
answered,
right.
but they're automatically called back immediately. One individual, though, can manage 6 live chats at a time, which is why they like to do it. A bit like playing multiple chess games. Because while someone's typing
Yes,
there
know.
next to
Yeah.
it, they go and look at the next one.
Yeah.
A new strategy on violence against women and girls came in 6 months ago. There's a victims code that most don't know about it. They urge people to use Crime Stoppers if they're afraid to report, because in many cases women may be afraid to report in case it gets to their abuser or their basher-upper. You can use www.police.uk/streetsafe to report anything that makes you feel unsafe.
Can I suggest,
yes?
not all of that, but a part of that, would that be relevant to put in the Outlook? I think there's some, yeah, and it's like the Ask Angela campaign.
Yeah, we put, I think that's why we put it in.
Yeah. I'm just thinking an update,
Is that
information like
Yeah.
that, getting
Good
out
point.
to the
That's a
local.
good point. Also, if in doubt about things, I mentioned this before, I think, use Ask the Police website. I've looked at that. Ask the Police is very good. If you Google Ask the Police, it takes you to a national police database. And then if you put in the question you've got, or you look through their lists, they've got answers to, I don't know, is it 1,000 questions or something?
Something of that nature.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
So if you want to know what the rule is about, you know, this or that or the other, they've often got something. Sometimes they'll say bit iffy, but sometimes they'll say, well, if it's this, and if it's that, it's that. It's quite useful. That's all new. You mentioned Ask for Angela, that's in nighttime hospitality settings, and Ask for Annie is in pharmacies. Don't know why it's different. And there's Clare's Law, which came in quite late because Clare was named after someone who was done in.
That's all right.
The police service, Kent Police Service attends. Do you remember that they're supposed to be doing 100% attendance of burglaries? They do 91% at the minute. So they're working on getting to 100, but 91's not bad.
That's one of the highest in the country.
Attendance, though, includes they rush along with the blue lights to try and catch who's doing it. They come along the next day to dust for fingerprints. They come along to talk to the owners by appointment. You know, it doesn't have to be that they come rushing along. It's whatever's appropriate, but it is attend rather than say, here's your crime number, go away. The crime squad, the Chief Constable's crime squad, which we started in February 2019, that's doing quite well. They investigate a lot of the burglaries. So far, they've got 1,500 years of prison sentences applied. This doesn't sound so good, but I gather it's fairly typical. They solve 6 to 7% of all burglaries. 6 to 7, not 6 to 7. That is including burglaries of sheds and allotments in the total, which of course are the very awkward ones. Burglaries in Kent, mind you, are down 44% in the last 3 years, which is encouraging. Or else not reported, I don't know. My Community Voice is being marketed by Citizens in Policing team, which is led by an inspector, a woman. CSUs are trying to drive the take-up and being trained in using it better, but, and I told them I wasn't very impressed with this, they've only got 9,100 people signed up so far. And as I pointed out, we've got 500 and something on next door just in Wittersham.
Yeah.
So just a quick question, who's looking after us here?
Well, it has been the PCSO,
Yeah.
Kate.
Yes, I've had
Is she back in action?
that. I don't know, but she
Okay.
I think
is
she's on
our
restricted
appointed.
duties. She's our
Because
person.
Ollie appeared, was it Ollie?
Yes, he did a few months ago.
Yes.
just
Ollie's son.
After she fell
No,
through.
not Ollie.
Okay. No, I just wondered whether Kate was
No, I have
back
been
from her
today. I've
accident.
been notified that our contact is.
Because that's what people locally often want to know.
Precisely.
Who's
Yeah.
the local?
Who is the contact?
Local.
Yes,
Who is,
and it is still.
and are they visible?
I think there's always a point to keep in mind there, that it's not exactly contact if something's going on, because she may
No.
not even be on duty.
Of
Whether
course.
it's a 101 or
Well, it's, a lot of it is down to reassurance, though. isn't it?
it's a person to have a discussion with if
Yeah.
there is an
Yeah.
issue or a pattern or something.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all
Good.
I have.
Thank you very much. That's brilliant.
I apologise for
I might
spending
need to
time
have-
on that, but there's a lot of good
Do you want to take it?
No, I
Well,
won't.